Hi everyone, I'm Vincenzo Berghella. Once again, welcome to Age Game FM Live. Kavita, good to see you again. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Dr. Berghella. I'm doing great. I always look forward to these sessions with you. So it's a great way to start my weekend, to start the day here with you.
That's great. So we've done quite a bit. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, so no, I think we've kind of done several topics now. This is our Happiness 5.0. So basically our fifth session now, and today we have some exciting topics to share with everyone about kind of wrapping up the last point of happiness from Dr. Bergella's wonderful book here. We'll be talking about the genetics of happiness and, talking about nature versus nurture, how those actually impact happiness from a child to one becoming an adult. But as always, before we jump into our talk, I think, we always like to open up with a bit of gratitude and invite all our audiences who are here to, find happier lives as well, to also take a moment to think of something you're grateful for. Do you want to go ahead, Dr. Bergella, and then I can share my gratitude too after that?
Sure. The thing that comes to mind, my father-in-law is flying right now from Rome to Philadelphia, and he'll be with us tomorrow.
Wow.
We'll celebrate. This month was my birthday, so as you know, we had a big thing at SMFM, and we'll do karaoke again with our personal friends at home tomorrow. My older kids are coming too. The one from New York, the one from Philadelphia. So I'm very grateful. My wife will be around, her sister, her family. So 11 family members and 40 friends. It'll be a lot of fun.
Wow, that's amazing. Oh, that sounds like an awesome time. And when you talk about that, I just have to tell the audience, Dr. Bergala had the most epic 60th birthday party at SMFM, and he got the whole team to sing karaoke, which was like so awesome. And as
And you
someone
think too.
Yes, and I was like, when I got to the party, I was like, there's no way I'm going up there. But that energy of the room, the vibe, it was so much fun, and everyone just felt like one giant big happy family singing together. It was amazing. So thank you for organizing that and inviting all of us to celebrate you.
Thank you. What about you? What about you? What's your moment of gratitude today?
I think for me today, I'm grateful that all the people that I love very dearly, my husband, my stepsons, my family, my parents, all back at home. I know they all are healthy and alive today. And I think it's a small thing. It sounds small, but you never know every morning that you wake up that the people that mean the most in the world with you will still be there with you.
Yeah,
And today, all of them are still here with me, and I don't take that for granted. So I'm really grateful for that. Yeah.
that's great. I can hear your voice moving.
Yes.
So, as you were saying, we'll talk about nature versus nurture, genetic of happiness, childhood roots, and some activities that increase or decrease happiness, actually.
Yep.
And some of this, I think, will surprise you in terms of, we think, for example, that maybe laying on the beach may be good, or moving somewhere nice may be good, and we'll see what the science is for
Right.
all kinds of things we choose to do. This is actually a professor at, I think, at UCSF in San Francisco, professor of happiness and psychology, etc. And basically, happiness, like many of our personality traits, 50% of it, it's well shown by twin studies, by lots of evidence, it's genetic. So, like people talk about, half nature or genetic, the blue right side of the slide, and the other half is nurture, or kind of the activities you choose, the life events. And again, this is not just our opinion, based on a lot of
Mhm.
things. So in a way, it is true that you could hit the jackpot, in terms of the DNA you inherit, in terms of a positive outlook on life.
Mhm.
For example, for myself, certainly my mother has a positive attitude. My father also, but I think I got my positive, happy side, trying to look at the happy side. From my mom, I hit the jackpot. My sister, my brother, for example, same parents, are different. So while, some people could look at the negative side of the slide and say, well, maybe I got, I don't know, my more negative traits from my grandfather or my father or whomever. I think the important thing of this slide is actually the left side, the fact that you
Yes.
can change who you are as you go. You talked about plasticity last time, and by the life events you go through, the activities and choices, which is really all generated by you and your choices, you
Mm-hmm.
can increase your happiness. Let's say, 1 to 100, you were not lucky enough and you were 50 or 30, you can bring it to 50 or 80 or higher just with activities, despite your the genes related to happiness you inherited. Any thoughts on
Yeah,
that?
no, I love that you said that. And very, because I was actually thinking about that when you were talking, because it's true. And a lot of people that, they're so used, like, you're like, yeah, I've always been depressed, or I've always, that's just how everyone in my family is like that. But this slide really highlights we are actually much freer from our genetics than we think we are. A lot of people say, no, this is just how I am. But as human beings, that's what makes us, we're the species that, what sets us apart from other species is our ability to supersede what our genes have encrypted for us. Like we can choose to say, and the first step to choosing is to de-identify with that statement by just stop saying that I am a depressed person. You can say a part of me was depressed, or maybe I have some depressive feelings. That you kind of, take it out from it being a blanket statement about you. I think that starts there. So no, I like that you kind of separated those things, because that's really the foundation of what we'll be talking about for children to become healthy and
Yeah,
adults.
yeah. Let me share a story, actually, a personal story about my family that just came
Yes,
to
please.
mind. So my mom has a very positive outlook, but because of life events and some,
Mm,
I'm maybe to blame, her kids left and things like that. She was actually on antidepressants for 30 years, and she still is.
mhm.
Um, her own uncle, committed suicide. He
I'm
worked in a
sorry.
bank. The bank went down. This is in Sicily many, many years ago, the beginning of the last century, and
Hmm.
he shot himself in the head.
Oh,
So, and another one of her father, my mom's brother, siblings had depression. So certainly we have that gene, and I may carry that.
mhm,
But I think that the difference is that you can fight that. I think I left Italy, and we'll talk about it in a few slides, for meritocracy to kind of find myself and who I really am, and that really helped me. I think my life partner, my kids, those are all intentional. Finding somebody you can really love,
mhm,
you want, and can love you the way you like to be
mhm,
loved. Kids that you give a lot to and you can love unconditionally and give you back. I think my story it's a pretty typical story of something that I probably do have depression. At some point, I was depressed 5, 6 years ago, but it was short time. And once I changed my activities, my life choices, I don't take any medication. Depression is gone. I don't see any, therapy
mhm.
like that anymore.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important. And the next few slides will be on the second topic of today, the childhood roots of adult happiness. That's actually me in the black and white picture on
I
the
love
left
that.
side of this slide. That's my mom, as you can see, happy demeanor, and my dad as well. I'm actually the one who is unhappy
No, that's such a great picture, though. I love that.
in the picture. And we'll talk about how you always blame your parents or praise your parents. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But the keys, and again, I put some authors there that you can read, some major happiness
Yeah.
gurus from the US and abroad. One is connectedness. Certainly the fact that you feel emotionally bound, to your family. For my father, the five of us, I have a brother and a sister, younger than me. The five
Mhm,
of us were everything. He actually didn't want to have friends over, anybody else. It was just the five of us, the connectedness. And I must admit, I could leave the country, and the continent when I was 19 by myself. My parents don't even speak English, and come here by myself because I just knew that they would defend me, that had
mhm,
unconditional love, that my father would always, back me up no matter, if I didn't make money for a while. I went to expensive medical schools and etc. The second, then there's play, practice, mastery, and recognition. So play meaning being in flow.
Mm-hmm.
And I have here the my little kids play. This is not one of my kids, but it's they play with toys and Legos and blocks. I remember when I was young, I would spend time just playing with little soccer figurines or whatever. And my mother said, "I forgot you were even alive. I forgot you were at home." I could go on for hours playing,
Uh-huh.
and later on with my brother and my sister, but at the beginning by myself. And that flow is when you're happy. And so if you can replicate that later on, um, at work, writing a paper or seeing patients or giving a lecture or doing what we're doing right now, we're probably very much in flow right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then you practice that, you become good at whatever it is, first blocks or Lego, then then again studying and talking to patients, and then eventually maybe writing a paper or being an editor or being a president or whatever you decide. And then master, which goes back to the I mentioned it, I think, before, the 10,000 hour rules. Michael Jordan,
Mm-hmm.
basketball, Roger Federer, the Beatles, practicing, practicing, practice. So you become so
Right.
good. People recognize you as a master of that, playing piano,
Mm-hmm.
Steve Jobs and computers or whatever, and then eventually you get the recognition, the applause in the
Mm-hmm.
theater, the applause at the SMFM oral, the pat in the back from your best friend, because again, this is not just work, but it's also playing your favorite sports or your favorite hobby. So really, really important, and not everybody has this. Unfortunately, I certainly did,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll talk how important it is to pass that on uh,
Yeah.
to your kids. But certainly that those are some adult roots.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I love that. When I just when you were sharing all that, it just reminded me that you talked about this in your book too. That and I think it's as a responsibility of a parent to a child, which I'll talk about later. But it's basically this, right? You shine a light on your child's light. You allow the child to explore everything. You don't say, well, that's not good, don't do that. Or like soccer is for those people, or like music is for those people. Like you don't limit your child. Let In your book you talk about let them explore everything, and when you see them, you as a parent, you can see that, oh, your child is really enjoying this. You see the potential they have in this. You can see that they're lost, like your mom saw what you were lost in, and then you can create more of that space, because that is how you end up fostering a child to become a master as an adult, because you've guided them on the path of what they actually really want to do, to their calling, right? And I think it's the responsibility of a parent to help nurture the calling of the child, right, when you see that for them. So no, I just kind of brought up that point.
Reminds me of another little story. We're very happy now. The number three tennis player in the world is Yannick Sinner. There's never been an Italian ranked that high, and he actually comes from the north of Italy, from the Alps, and he was the best skier in Italy when he was 11 or 12. And he said, "I'm the luckiest guy in the world because my parents, even if they were skier, I was so good,
Mhm.
they let me choose tennis that they had no idea
Mhm.
about, but they gave me the choice." It's exactly what you say. Having for the parents to understand what the kid is good at, what they like, how happy and in flow, they are
Mhm.
doing something, and then letting the kid, do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that
This,
was kind of my story too. Oh, sorry, let me just share a little bit of
yeah,
my
yeah,
story.
yeah. Go ahead.
No, because when I think back, because I have no doctors in my family. I'm the first doctor in my family.
Uh-huh.
And I remember even as a kid, when I think back, like my fondest memories, I have an older sister. She's a year and a half older than me, and I have a younger brother, 6 years younger. But when I was very little, it was just my sister and I. We're very close, even until today. But my favorite game to play with her was we called it Doctor Doctor. So I'd be the doctor, she'd be the patient all the time. I used to love that so much. And I think my parents saw that. And since I was a very little kid, I used to say, I want to be a doctor. I remember my mom was pregnant when I was 6 years old. And I will not forget, she has this book. It's kind of like a book for parenting, but it had medical illustrations, kind of like the one at the back here. It's called
Mhm.
You and Your Child. And she was pregnant with my brother, and I was obsessed with that book. Like till today, if you go look at open that book, all my scribbling and drawing all over it. And my mom was just like, she's like, why are you so obsessed with this whole pregnancy thing? I don't understand. And so with the medicine and this, and I remember, I think my dad saw that in me too. So evenings after dinner, we would sit and watch, medical television or whatever together, documentaries. And my dad would always pull up doctor shows for me, like, whether ER or trauma. And I would just sit there with him for hours and just lost and just be like, I want to do that so much. And I think he saw that in me, and he just kept building it. So it's just kind of highlighting that as a parent, when you see that your child loves something and you continue to build push them there and believe in them, that's good for them, then the child feels safe and confident in pursuing those things.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And we I think that we've seen a lot of unhappy kids. Like, you can't really conceive that there are some, like Agassi again in tennis, or Tiger
Mm-hmm.
Woods. Their parents conceived them so they can be the best tennis player or the best golf player. At the end, actually, we know that those people may not be as happy, may actually resent
Right.
their parents, even if they become the number one tennis player or golf player in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really, you need to instead let the child decide for themselves. And I can tell you, I do have two older sons.
Mm-hmm.
The decisions they make are the best ones, because they
Mm-hmm.
know. And you can help them, you can give them some experience, you can say, if you do this, this may happen, if you do that, that may happen. But at the end, it's their decisions, wherever they want to go for high school or college or
Mm-hmm.
graduate school, etc. And I was lucky enough that happened to me. I grew up on a beach town in Italy. This is actually me. um, I look like a black kid, when I
No,
was young. I have a Sicilian mom, and very, very dark and tanned all the time.
I
My
love it.
high school, yeah, this is my high school on the left upper, and it was a place where a great place to learn, but there wasn't much honesty in school. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
people, copied the homework or didn't study, and instead, when I came to the States, I wrote a book about on the other side of the oceans, the difference between, Pescara, my hometown, and New York, where I first went. And with all the problems here with this country, I found honesty in school. Nobody was cheating. In fact, you would get reported by your own peers, which is great. And I found something where I could see how much I was valued. In Italy, I was the son of, my father being an OBGYN himself, and in the States, I was by myself. I
Mm-hmm.
studied really hard. This is college, Manhattan
Wow.
College, where I went, and I studied like a maniac, like I'm sure you did. And this is where the practice came, the
Mm-hmm.
practice of doing what you like to do. At the same time, I partied. I always like to work hard, but play hard. This again in college. I forgot what it was that I had in this
Yeah, pineapple.
pineapple thing, but this was the famous bow ties and shorts parties that we used to
Love
throw.
it.
Uh,
Uh-huh.
I'm seeing my college friends in April, so I'm really happy. And medical school was also a time of challenge, because so
Mm-hmm.
many smart people. I survived it well. I did quite fine, but it was challenging for sure. But I
Mm-hmm.
knew that that's what I wanted to do. And there's a picture from 30 years ago from
Wow.
Jefferson. Jefferson now it's all skyscrapers and new buildings. And then went to New York, and as you can see, a very diverse residency program, wonderful team. And again, I maintain my childhood roots of happiness, doing what I like to do. As you can see me here, kind of screaming in the back
I
uh,
love
from
it.
happiness. So, again, that's kind of my story, and how thankful I am that my parents not only love me unconditionally, let me be in flow growing up, and eventually let me do exactly what I wanted to do. What do you think? What are your takes on these issues?
Yo, no, I completely agree. And like we were sharing stories in the beginning, that you see adults, either yourself or your friends or the people you love, those that were allowed to follow their path and do what they love are the ones that are successful
Yeah,
and happy. Because you have a lot of successful people who might not be happy because they've walked down this path That was
Yes.
not their chosen path. It was a path that was asked of them. So, like, I have a really good friend from my medical school. One of my best friends. Right, it was a group of four of us, and he's a son of a really influential politician in Thailand. His granddad was one of the elected prime ministers, and he loves art. He grew up with, his family had, of course, they had bodyguards and stuff, so they were always around, guns and stuff too, but he loved designing guns, like drawing guns. Like, that was something he was passionate, and he was really good at it. But his family and the society, they were like, no, you need to be a doctor. We need a doctor in our family, because that was what looked good for the family's image. So we started med school same year. And medical school in Thailand, you go from high school straight to medical school, right? And it's 6 years of medical school. And we all graduated. And he just kept failing and failing. It was so hard for him to show up to class, because it was not his passion. He was a smart kid, but eventually it really beat it out of him. And he, till today, so we graduated 6 years, he still repeated for another 6 years. He was in medical school for 12 years,
Or
until, unfortunately, and that's the time limit in Thailand. Like, if you don't pass med school by 12 years, you're not allowed to continue in the medical school. So he was let go from the school. And it just makes me so sad, because he spent his entire 20s and early 30s trying to live his family's dream, because they had blocked him from pursuing what he's actually really good at and really passionate at. And I think he would have really done amazing things for himself as a designer, for whatever he likes to do, or the artwork. So it's just kind of stories to show that you as a parent, you are, yes, in the authoritative figure, but you can determine your child's future, and you want to choose. When you love them, you choose what's good for them, not what's good for you. That's a really subtle difference, but it's just important. Yeah.
I think, as a preamble to your next slide, I often say, Kavita, that parents should, before having a kid, adults before having a kid, should get a license.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Should study, should take tests, should understand, and only when they understand these basic
Mhm.
principles, of loving your child unconditionally, and also letting them do what they like to do. The story
Mhm.
you share, I think it's a story that is way too common. So
Yeah.
it's really a responsibility of the parent, to the child.
Right. And I kind of highlighted that one of my favorite books on, talking about parenting. I think I love this word about conscious parenting. And there's this book by Dr. Shafali. She talks a lot about, like, this conscious parenting is knowing who you are, so that you don't project yourself onto your children, right? Because, like, example, again, just going back to the example of medical school, maybe that was because, that the grandfather, he maybe wanted to be a doctor and could not. So now he is saying, well, I didn't have the opportunities to become a doctor, but I'm going to make sure my kids get to do that. You are projecting your dreams, your unmet dreams, your unfulfilled dreams onto a child whose dreams might be completely different from yours. And
Yeah.
unless you realize that you're projecting, you are constantly going to tell yourself, no, I'm just choosing what's best for this child. You've masked your unconsciousness as an act of kindness to the child, but it is actually an unconscious act of projection, right? And the moment you're able to have awareness around what you're saying to your child, what you want for your child, is it really for them? Is it for me? I think that's an important question you have to constantly ask yourself. Is this my voice, or is this something good for them? And I think that's really the root responsibility of the parent, number one, right? And I think before even all of that, the other thing I'd say is, safety. The responsibility of a parent is to provide a safe environment for children, right? When you think about it, as human beings, when we scan fetuses in the first trimester, right? Which the part of the brain that develops first, when we're doing our NT scans, you see the midbrain, you see the thalami there. You don't really see the cerebral cortex really develop yet. We are feeling creatures. We're not thinking creatures. Our feeling part of our brain develops way before our thinking. When babies are born, the intellect is not there yet, right? But they can feel, they can sense, they know when they're safe, they know when they're not safe. their emotions that are letting out when they're crying, when they're being left in the cradle alone, they're not feeling safe, and the responsibility of the parent is to nurture that safety, because the world we live in today is structured to help them with the intellect. That is going to come anyway. There's so much influence on the intellect that will already happen, but that safety, unless a child feels safe when they're born, they're going to find different ways to cope to be safe themselves, and that is what might lead to complications later. So let me give you an example, right? So if you have a child that's constantly crying, as and then the baby feels like, oh, the parent's going to come soothe me, make me feel safe. But in the modern world, some maybe lots of science textbooks, or some old doctors research back in the day may have said, well, no, let the children learn, even at 2 months of age, let them learn to cry, and then they will stop themselves, they will learn to cope. Well, that makes it easy for the parent, but that child is asking for safety. And in that moment, when the child realizes that no one's coming to save me, it learns to say, I got to keep this in. I got to keep this in. So the next time, and when the child cries, the parent's like, stop crying. Why are you constantly crying about? So the child learns, okay, I can't cry. I got to keep my emotions in. And even when the child now starts to be in pain, they're scared to cry, because they're like, oh, I know that if I cry, mom's not going to be happy. Dad's not going to be happy. They don't want to be awakened in the middle of the night. So this child grows up into an adult that keeps the emotions in all the time. And then what happens? That's why we see so many anxious adults walking around, teenagers with severe anxiety and depression, because they never knew how to manage those emotions. They never knew what to do with those emotions. So they just hold it in. But as human beings, and emotions are energy, right? We store that energy in our body for a long time. Eventually, it spills out, and it spills out in behaviors, because we don't know. And then it spills out as anger, it spills out as depression, it spills out as us finding other ways to cope with the feeling when it comes out, drugs, alcohol, whatever. These are all coping strategies, because we did not know how to cope with emotions. And I think that, yeah, go ahead, please.
Emotions come from the Latin movere. Movere is move. So it's something that moves you from. So emotions are what drives everything. It's kind of exactly what you're saying, and it starts when you're little. We have a 2-year-old and a 5 months old at home right now, and that's all they want. They want to
Yeah.
be emotionally protected. They want to know that if their pacifier gets out of their mouth, or if they want to feed, or they need the diaper change, that somebody's there for them. And I think
Yeah.
it's a lot of the problems that we see in adult life later on, like you say, drugs and violence, etc., actually stem from when you were 5 months old or 1 year.
Yeah, exactly. The lack of emotional safety. And yeah, that's really the root cause of it. And this is one thing that I feel like I still struggle. I don't have any kids of my own that I've like raised yet. I have two stepsons, they're all grown up now. But thinking about, like, one thing that I never understood about, and growing up in Thailand, and then from Indian culture, there's so many cultural differences. When the babies are little here in the US, one thing that really surprised me was that you just put the baby in the in the cot or cradle, and just leave them in another room on their own all night. And they're just, if they cry, they learn to stop themselves, they learn to be. Whereas I grew up, where I grew up until I think like 6 or 8 or 10 months, or maybe even a year, I was in the same bed as my parents. I felt safe throughout. I never felt alone. And I think it really does something to your nervous system. And this just might be just my own biased opinion, but it does. It makes you feel calm, it makes you feel safe. You wake up in the middle of the night, you're like, I'm okay. There's no intellect, but the feeling of safety is beyond what words can describe. um, and I don't know if there's a right or wrong. And I think in the Western culture or modern world, maybe we've had to adapt to that, to allow parents to also be able to function, get the sleep, get the rest they need to provide for the child, because that is the other important thing too. So it's like, what is right, what is wrong? I don't know. But I think the bottom line is maintaining your child's safety and making them feel like they're not alone during those early years are so crucial. You know,
And
I
there's all kinds of things. I don't want to go now into pediatrics too much, but we have a little thing that he can hit and hear our voices, and he
Oh,
can hit it
nice.
all the time, if he's alone in the room. We have remotes that we can see him, but we can also talk to him. So if we see him, moving around, we can say, relax, sleep, daddy's
Yeah.
here, mommy's here,
Oh,
you're
nice.
good.
Yeah.
And we
I love
tend
that.
to, every kid is a little bit different, our two kids or the younger kids are different. But I think the bottom line is that in some way, either you be there or having some other way that they know you're next door,
Mhm.
and
Right.
they need to feel safe. And if you're not there, they need to feel you're available. And that's, I think,
Mhm.
a major key.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yes, I think this is just, by breaking down, it's just conscious parenting, knowing when you're projecting onto your child, responsibility of the parent, and creating a safe environment and shining the light on your child's strengths, I think are the key things that I would say, the responsibility of a parent to raise a happy adult, not just to raise an adult. You want to raise happy adults because that is what you're creating for the world. And if everyone thought that way, if every parent was able to do that, the world would be filled with so many happier adults, and it would make the world a happier place too. We have that angry adults are basically traumatized children that haven't been able to process their anger.
Yeah,
And then, yeah, we talk about nature versus nurture. You kind of touched on that earlier. And I think I love this poem. So, a little story here, in my bedroom growing up when I was a little kid, it was, I shared the room with my sister basically my whole life. And I remember my dad used to go on business trips, to Australia. And there was this one trip he came back and he bought me this gift. I've got so many gifts as a child from my parents. I don't remember any gift, but this one I remember. There was this beautiful frame of this poem that he got me that said, "Children learn what they live," and it was stuck right above my bed. Since I was a little girl until growing up, and I just love what it says in here. Children learn with criticism, they learn to condemn. They grow up with hostility, they learn to fight. So, and if they grow up with approval, they learn to like themselves. If they grow up with love, it's what you provide for the children is what is the adults that they will become. And so just a beautiful poem that I really enjoyed, and it's just something that's such a beautiful memory from my childhood of a gift that my dad gave me that till today is probably still the most special gift I've ever got from him. Yeah.
I think I may need to buy it for my kids.
Yeah, no, it's really nice. Yeah, it's a beautiful portrait. Yeah. And again, to talk about this slide I put here is kind of went back to what we talked about earlier, that if a child can do advanced math, speak three languages, receive top grade, but cannot manage the emotion or lack the EQ, right? Then it's all that other stuff really doesn't matter, because there's evidence now in today's world. We've lived in at least a century focused only on grades and academic achievements and intellect and success, external success, that if we've seen that doesn't really result in happy adults or a happy world. And that's why I think people are starting to recognize that now. There's so much more shift to talking about, like what we're doing here, talking about happiness, talking about mindfulness, talking about the mental health. And I'm really glad to see that shift, because ultimately it has to go hand in hand, right? You have to teach children. Don't know, these things are not taught in the classroom. When they're having big emotions, what to do with it, they don't know what to do with those emotions, they cry. But if they were taught about, like, hey, it's normal to feel these emotions, what are you feeling, can you label them, what do you want to do about it, if they're taught about these things since a young age, then when they become adults, they've learned the coping skills they need to, that works for them. And I think I'm starting to actually hear about a lot of school kids, schools, kindergartens, and places starting to do this now, which is so wonderful.
It's
Yeah.
much better. It's certainly much better than it was for my generation, and it was better for my two older kids who are now in their 20s. But for the little ones I have, they really teach it, and you should be taught in school. These emotional connections, working on your strengths, identifying
Hmm.
strengths, talking about emotions, which again, move the world. I think those are things that shouldn't be just taught here, uh,
Yeah.
as you're professionals already, but hopefully will be taught when people are really, really young. I have a couple of things to say about this slide, kind of what you're saying, the responsibility of being a parent, and the fact that even with the same parents, kids are going to grow up differently.
Yeah.
Andrea here on the top left, who is now 26. As I said, he's an MD, PhD student here at Jefferson. He is very driven. He kind of like you. He, from his grandfather with diabetes, who was sick, he felt like he wanted to improve health, and he always had that in him. But for example, I grew up like playing soccer and tennis. Those were my favorite sports. I played a little bit of everything, but he ended up being a rower, which I
Oh,
had no idea about. I mean, I
wow.
could row, but not, eventual Division One, and he came 13th in the all United States
Wow.
when it was 18th. We went to the finals in Florida. So one thing about nature versus nurture, I think that genetically, I don't think he had rowing anywhere in his genes, but I think that nurture also doesn't come just from parents. We've been talking about
Mm-hmm.
parents and how they could be blamed or thanked for what
Mm-hmm.
they did. But I'm reading this book, The Nurture Assumption, that talks about how peers influence the
Oh, yeah.
50% of your happiness that is not genetic. And certainly for this older too, rowing certainly came from peers. In high school,
Mm-hmm.
he was exposed to rowing. He had a great coach, and he did rowing and excelled at it. They both play chess. This older two sons. We went to 6 national chess
Wow.
tournaments. At some point, they were playing with actually lots of Indians and Russians and Chinese, and kids that in middle school were already out of school, being homeschooled and playing chess all the time. And again, my ex-wife and I had no chess background, and I learned that from peers. Pietro now works, the one on the top
Love.
right, who is 24 and lives in New York City. He works for JP Morgan. Again, I don't think there's any relative in the last 3 degrees, grandparents, great grandparents,
Mm-hmm.
was in finance. And I think his best friends, August, since he was a little kid, say they want to be in finance and work in Wall Street. And I think that
Wow.
there was some influence on him. So one thing I want to say, I want to relieve parents as well that yes, what you do is extremely, extremely important, but it's also important, you know, what their peers around them, show
Mm-hmm.
them, and so it is important somewhat, where you live a little bit and what schools they go to.
Mm-hmm.
They speak English without any accent. They certainly didn't learn that from me
Yeah.
or their moms. They speak Roman when they speak Italian, without an accent, because their peers, were from the Rome regions. When we spent
Nice.
the summers, when they spent the summers in Italy. Um, so peers, as your child is growing up, have a lot to do with it, and they're having a lot to do with the little ones. And I'll tell
Mm-hmm.
you, now that I'm a quote unquote older parent, the responsibility for the kids, it's huge.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever you do, Kavita, they copy.
Yeah.
If you, I don't say really any quote unquote bad words, but if you did, they would repeat it right
Oh,
away.
yeah. Uh-huh.
If you pick your nose, they're going to pick your nose. If you talk about poop or caca or whatever, they're going to repeat that thing over and over. And if you smile, like Julia, the 5 months old, I mean, if you smile at her, she smiles back right away. Talk about emotions. She certainly has no intellect, not even, she doesn't even know what their hands are. She's trying to figure out if she
It's
has
those
hands.
mirroring neurons. The mirroring neurons are on. Yeah.
Or like, she has, I think, what 1,000 neurons or 1,000,000 neurons every day, something crazy like that, forming. But she has emotions. If people are around, she doesn't cry. If you leave her
Mm,
around the room, 3 seconds, she cries. She
mm,
likes to be held.
yeah.
But especially, what's amazing, she likes to be looked at. If you look at her and you smile, 100% of the time she smiles back.
Oh.
And that tells you everything. That's how you and I are, even now in our 60s or 30s or 20s. You just, you want people around you to be happy, and you're happy
Mhm.
back, and you model that as a little kid.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that story. It's so beautiful. And, you have a really beautiful family. And you're right, how you show up as a parent really models like you're saying, your children model you since such a young age. And that determines who they become as adults too. So no, wonderful. And I love this poem that Frederick Douglass had put out there. It's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men, which again goes back to parenting responsibly when children are young make a big difference to the adults that they become. And you're right, as parents, you're not going to be able to parent them all the way. You do it maybe until they're a certain age, and then you're right, the group of friends they end up engaging in is what also contributes to who they then become an adult. But you raise a child that feels safe, that is happy there, and raise them with good values, they will know to choose friends that align with that as well. So it's like a domino effect too. And I love this other quote that he mentions too: the child is the father of
That's
the man.
beautiful.
Yeah.
So beautiful. It's great.
Yeah. So, we talked about earlier responsibility of the parent. The second thing I want to talk about is the responsibility of the child as a child. And then the third thing I'll talk about is, the responsibility of the child as an adult. But, responsibility of the child as a child is to feel, is to learn, is to explore exactly what you put in your first slide. You talked about the play, flow, connectedness. That is all children need to do. They need to continue to bring light to their most authentic self. Just live and learn, explore, and have fun. And when you walk down the streets, you'll sometimes, if you just observe kids, they do the most like wonderful things, right? They'll walk by and then they'll see it. Like literally yesterday I was walking and just a twig on the floor. A kid walks by, his mom's trying to drag his arm, and he just like wants that twig so bad, he runs back, picks it up, and he's in so much awe and wonder just looking at a piece of wood. It really pulled me into the present moment. I was like, wow, we were all that person. We were all so in awe of everything in life, in a piece of wood. Now we just walk over it and don't think twice about it. But and when that childhood of you is alive, you are allowed, you will be able to bring that into your adulthood, your inner child. They talk about nurturing that inner child you have, right? So I just as parents, give your child a space to be fun, to explore, give them a safe space, because otherwise then children, like we talked about earlier, if they're unsafe, this is also the age where they're developing coping mechanisms to feel safe. All they're doing is, everything that they do is just to feel safe. That's all. So whatever coping mechanisms they develop this time is to keep them, make them feel safe. Yeah. And then I talk about this, the responsibility of the child and as an adult. Not everyone is blessed and lucky to be in a perfect home with loving parents and parents who are always there, and that's the reality of the world. And unfortunately, as children, you don't get to choose that. And sometimes your parents might want the best for you, but they might not be able to because they're working the whole time, and they're working because they know they need to provide for you, right? So you end up forming all these your coping mechanisms. But what you have to realize, that when you become an adult, you need to be able to step out and say, what coping mechanisms have I developed that actually don't serve me today? Like, I'm going to share like my own personal story, right? If you go to the next slide, Dr. Berghella, please. So you see this picture here. This is the School of Convent of Jesus and Mary in Waverly in Missouri. It's in India. It's at the base camp of Himalayas. My school, this is a boarding school I went to when I was a little kid. It's surrounded by the Himalaya range. Its base camp is beautiful, absolutely beautiful. This school was opened in 1879 when the British ruled over India for 200 years. And during that time, they needed international schools for their kids to go to. So they built these beautiful schools up in the mountains. And it was always up in the mountains because the weather was good. There were lesser chance of infections or, waterborne infections, tropical infections, because it was great. So, and I'm third generation Indian family in Thailand, right? My great grandparents migrated when India and Pakistan split. My family was living right at the border between India and Pakistan. So that's why they moved to Thailand, And so my grandmom was like 1 or 2 years old when they moved. My parents were born and raised there. I was born and raised there. But being this part of like an Indian community in a country in Thailand that does not speak English at all, it was still very important for the Indian community that their priority was, we're going to make sure our kids still learn English. We're going to make sure our kids know English, So when my parents were young, the only way that my grandparents could make sure they learned English was to send them away to boarding schools in India. because Thailand had no international schools at that time. There were no schools that taught English in Thailand. Thailand is a completely Thai speaking country, you know. And so my parents, both mom and dad, went to boarding schools in Missouri. You know, they were actually in schools near each other. They never met each other until they came back to Thailand and got married. But then they were in the schools right by each other throughout their whole adulthood, and they stayed there. So when it was my turn, I was like, and my parents wanted the best for us too. There were not a lot of international schools in Thailand when I was growing up. So my mom and dad were like, well, we should do what we did. We will send them away to into boarding schools so they will learn this amazing English. They will have great education, great curriculum. It's a beautiful place. They will love it. Right. So this came from such a good place. They wanted the best for me. Right. So I was sent there when I was in grade one. I was 5 or 6, 6 years old or something. And here you're coming, you feeling safe. You're like, I have this perfect, beautiful family, loving home. And all of a sudden, one day, they come and drop you in the middle of nowhere in the mountains and then say, goodbye, see you in 9 months. So that moment, like that, I'll tell you, you talk about attachment styles later, you in your future slides, but that anxiety that came up of feeling like the people that were my anchor, the people that loved me, left me. It really formed this anxious attachment in me without realizing. And now that I look back, I'm able to recognize and put the pieces together. And that, but for a long time I didn't. And I wasn't. It was great. Like, this school was a blessing for me. I was there for a few years, 3 years, with my sister and a whole other group of girlfriends that were from Thailand that till today are still my really good friends. These are childhood friends from like 30 years now. And when international schools started opening up in Thailand when I was in third grade, my parents finally brought me back to Bangkok because I cried every day. And, for 3 years, and they finally brought me, and I finished studying, in a British school in Thailand, which worked out great. But that memory went still, till today, like I still remember that feeling. And it took me a long time as an adult, when people were leaving me, even whether it was in relationships, in friendships, I would just feel this like panic inside me right away. And I kept wondering, like, why am I feeling this way? Just because they're gone doesn't mean they've left me, but the wiring that I formed from this memory left me feeling so anxious that it took me a long time to unlearn that. So, my point being that the responsibility of a child as an adult is recognizing your patterns and recognizing, what is it, where did this come from? And it might not be real. And when you recognize that, then it's your responsibility to unlearn that, to rewire your brain and say, no, it's not, no one's leaving you. You feel this way because of that, but actually they love you. They're still here. They're just in a different space, different dimension right now, and that's fine. And there are lots of such things like that come up. Like, some people will say, well, I've always been this way, or but that's because you haven't really asked yourself, but why am I this way? And unless you recognize the why, you won't be able to break that pattern. So that's just kind of my little story there. Any thoughts, Dr. Berghella?
No, no, thanks for sharing. That's a beautiful story. I will always remember it. And you're right. We'll talk about attachment styles later on. And if you're left alone as a child for whatever circumstances, some kids unfortunately may have, again, a parent that is homeless, or is
Mm-hmm.
a drug abuser, or is just
Yeah.
alcoholic, or violent. I think that unfortunately, has an effect for life. You want to feel that attachment.
Yeah. No, and I think this is I just add this because I heard this concept recently. When you're trying to nurture happiness in every single day, even for yourself, right? Think about every day if you can do something that will support your bio, your psycho, and your social happiness daily. You don't have to think about, how am I going to be happy? Just every day think about this. So bio is basically your biology, eating good food, nutritious food, healthy food, eating well, drinking water. That's the biology of it. Psycho is the way you think, your mindset, the way you look at the world. And social is the environment you surround yourself in, your friendships, and the people at your work, the people that, when you walk down the street, you smile at them. So, if you just think about this every day, that you're like, if you fulfill these three things for yourself daily, are intentional about it, it compounds the happiness over time daily.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so important. Um, so we covered genetics,
Mhm.
and nature versus nurture. I think
Mhm.
it's so important to understand the nurture side. We covered the childhood roots, and thank you for sharing some beautiful stories. So how, as a child, you can be affected, and also as a parent, you can affect your child. And we can certainly come back to some of those, but the next few slides and some of this we'll cover next time, are on activities that may be associated or not with happiness. And I think I just finished writing this book on love happiness that you see there. I'll be happy to send you a copy.
Thank you.
And maybe we'll do in later on this year something on love itself, because it's really an activity that has been associated with um, with happiness. And we'll talk in the next sessions about many other things. But I think one of the bases, after researching this for many years, it took me about 40 years to write to write this book on happiness. I probably started in my teens, and finally, I think now found some science and emotion that could, I'm in a good place that I could write it and finish it. But first, it starts to learn who you are and who that other person is. But really,
Mhm.
the first thing is who you are. What are you like? What's important for you? You were sharing before that you maybe have a little bit of anxiety in terms of attachment because of have going to a boarding school when you're 5 or 6, in another country. Um, but it takes a while to recognize who you are,
Mhm.
and what you like, and how you like to be loved, and how you like
Mhm.
to love, for example. And then you need to realize who the other person is in front of you as you begin to learn
Yeah.
about them, and if that fits you or not. That may be the best person in the world in many ways, but doesn't fit you. And I like this slide that maybe you want to comment on.
Yeah. No, I think no, thank you. And I think this slide really is a summary of what you and I have been talking since the first episode, right? I think it's really help people realize that number one, happiness is their choice. That your life, how your life is every day is your choice. It is in your hands. And the work starts with introspection. The work starts with getting to know yourself. And that's the only way you will be able to shed those layers that are holding you back, those little bars that are surrounding you, and you'll feel free, like that man standing on top of the mountain. You can experience that emotional state of ecstasy when you know who you are and live in alignment with that. So I think that's why I love this slide.
and only by knowing again who you are and the extraordinary version of you as you have in the slide, you can then be open to love. Another way to know yourself, we've touched on, I think, in our
Yep.
first session, is to take the gallup.com/influence strength survey. Comes with a book as well. There are 32 different things you can be, and I found out by taking this test now about 10 years ago that my number one strength is learner, number two is woo, then I'm an achiever, a maximizer. I like to maximize other people around me, and responsibility. And I think about this all the time, and it shapes who I am. And I think it's important for the partner I have. It's important at work for my coworker. It's important for you and I to know, for people
Mhm.
that interact with all around. But most importantly, it's important for you and your partner to know
Mhm.
where you come from. Another thing that, again, maybe in a future session we'll expand on. There are these wonderful books by Gary Chapman about the 5 love languages that are
Mhm.
pretty famous. Um, I think it's important to take this quick,
Yeah.
easy test. On Google, it's free. Um, I found out, unfortunately, only in my 40s that in my number one and two love language are physical touch and words of affirmation. I need to hug, and I'm a hugger, as people say.
Yeah.
I am somebody who compliments people, and I like to be complimented too. If somebody tells me, you filled, the dishwasher well, versus, the dishes are terribly and all messed up. It makes a difference in my well-being. Um, Chapman makes the point that we should speak the 5 love languages all well, and we should recognize the 5 love language in our partner But I think the science, not only from him but in general, is that the closer you align in many things, not only culture, language, etc., but especially in emotions, and five love
Mm-hmm.
languages are emotions, the easier it is. You can certainly, as a physical touch, spend the life with somebody who's acts of service first,
Mm-hmm.
but then she needs to understand that physical touch is important, and you need to
Mm-hmm.
understand that when she buys the toothpaste that is run out and you forgot about, that that's an act of service you need to be happy about. But it's easier when you're both, let's say, quality time together, and you both recognize that an hour or two every day you need to spend time
Yeah.
together. This is really, I think, key. I think, as a marriage counselor or as a relationship, I have nieces, nephews, kids that are, I think, pretty close to choosing, hopefully, their life partners. And I think they should all take, this test and understand this stuff. What do you think?
No, I completely agree. And I came across this much later in my life too. Yeah, and it was before I met my now husband Tori, and I think it really helps because then you're also, because sometimes in relationships when you go and you expect people to fulfill this part of you, you're like, he doesn't love me, she doesn't love me, although they love you deeply, they're just not loving you in your language. So
Yeah,
unless you know your language, you're not going to be able to communicate to the other person what you actually need. you know and the other person might think they're doing everything right for you because they're loving you in their love language. And the reason this is important both ways is because it's human nature. We love people in our love language, but other people actually need to be loved in their love language. you
absolutely.
you know so it goes both ways. So it takes practice to first be able to communicate what your love language is so your partner will know. And the second practice is to then, when you are showing love to your partner, don't love them in your love language because that comes naturally, that comes innately. Love them in their love language. Like for me, I'd say quality time and physical touch are my top two. I need to spend some time together every day, just, not even out anything fancy, just sit at home or cuddling or hugging. Like that is the most important thing for me. And for my husband, Tori, he loves quality time too and words of affirmation. Like he loves, when you tell him when he's done something, as when you show appreciation, it means a lot to him. So, and before, maybe that was not something that I did all the time, but when now that I know that it's his love language, I am intentional about doing more of that because I know that fills his cup. So it's just watering each other the whole right through the
Yeah.
ways that are meaningful for each other.
And that's what love is. And I didn't put the definition here, but love is making the other person happy. And you can only make the other person happy by, again, giving them what they need.
Mm-hmm.
If it's like, acts of service come natural to me, but not as much. But if I have a partner that's what they like, um, to them, it's a lot more important, again, to make the dishes or do laundry
Yeah.
or do the shopping or cleaning the house, so whatever acts of service. And if you tell them, you're beautiful, or give them a hug, that may mean nothing to them.
Right.
Maybe important to you, but maybe not. And so you really need to learn all five love languages,
Mm-hmm.
learn what your partner likes, and like you did with your husband Tori, kind of hit them all the time. And at some point, I think relationships may not work when you decide that, for example, physical touch is really important for you, and that a person just is not going to give it to you. It's impossible for them. It's not that they're mean, or
Mm-hmm.
it's just that it's difficult for them. They weren't brought up by parents that were hugging them. They don't have it in their genes, and nature and nurture brought them to a place that physical touch maybe it doesn't come natural. I have a lot of friends who they tell me,
Mm-hmm.
please don't hug me. Friends and colleagues,
Yeah.
fellows,
Yeah.
residents, and it's hard for me. But I will never hug Emily again. She doesn't like to be hugged. And that's important for a social relationship, and it's even more important for personal relationship. For personal relationships, like Emily, I can write a paper about and stuff, and it's fine not to hug. In your personal relationships, you're going to be with somebody 30, 40, 50 years. Hopefully, it's important for you to decide if that's a deal breaker, so to speak. And the
Mm-hmm.
earlier you decide, hopefully in the first one or two dates,
Right.
the easier it is. Because if you spend 20 years and then you realize, what, I can't live with, for you,
Yeah.
for example, quality time, and this person works all the time, goes on trips all the time, and we're never together. and that makes you sad and unhappy, then you're kind of in trouble.
Yeah, no, I think this is a great conversation starter for when you're out dating too. If you're just meeting
Correct.
new people, and that's actually what one of the first few conversations Tori and I had. We talked a lot about like what are your values, what are your love languages. These are conversations we actually talked about before we actually like officially started dating, and it was really helpful because then you know what you're getting into, you know, and you know if it's right for you or not.
We could talk about love for forever. Oh, sorry, I'm going through the slides without. Talk about love forever, but and we're coming to the top of the hour.
Yeah,
So as you could see, I went through them. We have a few more things to go through. I think today we covered a lot of great things, and we
yep,
have a lot of great materials to cover in the next session. Um, it's March 8th at 8 a.m. Eastern. When we started, I think you and I didn't think we were going to have 6 or more sessions on
yeah, it's been
happiness, but
awesome.
it has worked out. So, Kavita, thank you very much. Thanks everybody for listening. Any last words you want to end with?
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I think, the last word, I think the message is still the same as earlier. Get to know who you are, whether you're a child or an adult. You have the power to shape your own life, and make it the most beautiful life for yourself. So keep working on yourself. Thank you so much for joining us. And, hopefully you enjoyed the conversations, because I thoroughly always love having these sessions with Dr. Berghella.
This really make us happy.
Yes.
Thanks, everyone.